Ready?
All right. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back, everybody. We got our full bellies, so hopefully we can all stay alert as we continue on. Sometimes. So we're going to move into the community activist portion of the program, and so I know a lot of them are in there right now, but I learned from Brother Fred Hampton. He said politics is war without bloodshed, and war is politics with bloodshed, and it's all politics and it's all activism. And I say that to say that people that are community activists are soldiers. They are fighting a fight. It is a real fight. They are on the front line. Their lives can be in danger, even if they have no weapons in their hand. Because of their voice, they become dangerous to the system. And people especially people that the system we're getting ready to bring up, when you're the name and you're the face, you become the target and you become a problem for people that don't want things to change. So it's very important to have those people. The everyday soldiers are important, but there's always a leader. There's always somebody that can help us get there, that lead the way and take the bullets, so to speak, figuratively and unfortunately literally. Those people have to do it. So it's I'm always impressed. I always have admiration for people who take the lead, and leading others is not an easy task. Some people, it may look easy. You see these names, all the great leaders we ever heard, from Malcolm to Huey or whatever, and they look like, they're charismatic, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of strain. There's a lot that goes on in their personal lives, or part of their personal life they give up to do the work for the people. So it is, I can't overstate how much and how important it is to have people like the sister in the community. So without further ado, I'm going to bring up Nikkia Tolbert. It says community activist. Do you have an organization or anything you want to mention? Okay.
Would you like me to share it?
Yeah, no, come on up and you share it in there. I didn't know if you want to be introduced as the head of the organization or not. I just said community activist. So thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. May peace be unto you all. My name is Nikkia Tolbert, as was stated, and I am non-Muslim. I come from a long history of Christian women who are very strong and vocal. But I appreciate that you all have welcomed myself and my sons into your sacred space with such love and with such peace. And we are learning a lot. And as we rode here from Virginia Beach, I talked to my sons about this experience being something different for them. And their older sister was on the telephone, and she said, what are you all looking forward to? And they said just being exposed to new learning experiences and gaining what we can from being in this place. So thank you all for allowing me. So my name is Nikkia Tolbert. I want to give you a little bit of background about myself so that it makes sense that I'm the one standing up handling this huge topic. I go back to being a young girl growing up in Norfolk. I grew up in a neighborhood called Bowling Park. If any of you are familiar with that, the community was named after Richard Bowling, who was a very popular Baptist pastor and speaker. My earliest days in this topic that I'm going to share with you came from me being a young girl in elementary school. I was an avid reader, like my brother, the librarian. I couldn't go outside before I read the encyclopedia. There were things I had to do. I was raised in a household with my grandparents, and there were certain things that I had to do before I could go outside and I could play. And at that time, I didn't value that. But it taught me a lot of the values that I possess today and have shared with my 4 children. So there was an instance when we had a Black History Month contest. And, well, I wrote about Martin Luther King. At that time, we weren't exposed to too many other figures. And my essay was not accepted. And I didn't understand why, because I made all A's. And so I was heartbroken. I went home to my mom. I was crying. I said, they're not accepting my essay. This was my first experience with advocacy and activism, because my mother said, well, no, I read your essay. This is a very good essay. We are going to fight to find out why your essay was not accepted. And when we went back to school and we spoke with the teacher, she said, well, I didn't like her penmanship. the writing wasn't good enough to have been accepted. And so my mother said, okay, well, I'll go talk to the principal. And we went and talked to the principal. And what we found out, and my mother talking to the principal, was that my essay was not the only one that was not accepted. But there were a number of black girls whose essays were not accepted. And I watched my mother and my aunts come up to the school every single day and go to the office until all of our essays were accepted. I went on to win the competition on a national level, but it was the first time I said, I don't like what it feels like to be mistreated. I don't like what it feels like because I was a little girl. So I'm trusting the adults around me. I don't like what it feels like to not have a voice. That was troublesome for me, even as a little girl. And so at that point, I was in the 2nd grade, and I remember there were people in my class who would be picked on for different things because maybe we didn't understand how they spoke or how they articulated their feelings or how they dressed or how they smelled. And those people, this is before we made bullying a popular term, but those people would be treated differently, and I didn't like that. And so I was a little thing, but I was feisty, and I would speak up for the people around me. And I gained that reputation as I got older. Living in the community like Bowling Park, we didn't really have access. A lot of people didn't have access to stores. Like we can go to a Walmart today or to a Food Lion, but fortunately we did have a vehicle, but for a lot of the people I grew up with, there was no transportation. So we relied on those corner markets. And so at that time when I was growing up, you could go as a 10-year-old and buy cigarettes and beer. And my grandfather would send me to the corner market. It was Martell. So if anyone is familiar with the history of Norfolk, Herbert Collins, who once served on our Norfolk City Council, he would allow us to come. He would allow my grandfather to almost create a tab when we didn't have enough money to make the purchases. But his store was limited to what could be purchased. And so sometimes I had to go a little further and cross Princess Anne Road, right, to Spartan Market. And the one day my grandmother said, okay, you're old enough to go to Spartan Market. I went in that store and I was outraged. I saw fruit that was rotten. I saw vegetables that should not be consumed by humans. I was reading the expiration dates on the items in this store, and I refused to make a purchase. And I went back home, and my grandmother said, where are my items? I said, I didn't purchase anything from that store because the food is not good for us to eat. And my grandmother said, well, Gramps won't be here until later. I need you to go back to, I'm not going to that store. Man, come on now, you did not stay up to your grandma like that, back in that time. But she listened, and a few people from my court got cardboard boxes, and we wrote in crayon, do not shop here. This food is not healthy. Now, we didn't get the store closed, but what we did do was bring some awareness to the community. And there were people in my community who began gardens. So my grandfather was one, and so in each court, there was someone assigned to develop a garden so that we could talk to our residents in our neighborhood about what healthy food looks like, about having the power to grow your own food so you don't have to rely on the corner market who doesn't really care about your well-being or your health. So as an educator, I entered the school system, and the first job assignment I had was working with young girls who were pregnant. That school was Coronado. I had I didn't want to go there. And when I got assigned there, I said, why are you sending me to a school? I want to go to a big school. I want a lot of people in my class. And they said, the principal at that time was from Bowling Park. She said, I really feel like this will be a good place for you. So I went, and well, it was because I was a teenage mom, so it made sense. So I could relate to the young ladies who I would instruct. And what I learned, the power of having a voice and being an advocate and being an activist was really cultivated in that place. And in that place, because these young girls were so marginalized that they gave them a little school. They didn't necessarily do the things that was necessary to maintain the school, but for many of the girls and their parents, their voice was limited. It had been silenced. They weren't able to articulate their needs. They were just happy that there was a place for their children to go to school. And so I said, this is not good enough. And so we went to city council meetings, we went to school board meetings, we met with the superintendent until we were able to bring things to Coronado that all the other schools had. So they had a student government association by the time we were done. They had a support group by the time we were done. They were able to participate in science fairs, which is something they weren't able to do. All of our teachers were able to attend the teacher meetings, which was something that they could not do prior to a few of us coming together and putting our voices together and our hearts together and the desire to see people treated fairly. And so it's been embedded in my heart. Of course, everybody is not designed for every level of activism, but being able to choose what you are designed to do. Because everyone, let me ask this question. How many of us in the room consider themselves an activist? Okay. Would anybody mind sharing why they consider themselves an activist? Just one person.
No. I consider myself an activist because I'm active, number one. In my community, I have an awareness of my community, and I found what I need to do, the role that I need to play based on my path. And my path is hip-hop. Hip-hop is misunderstood. We'll learn about that a little bit more today. But that is my role in activism. Hip-hop and how it should really look and what it should really be doing in our community. So that's why I'm active at.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that. Mm-hmm. Now I want to use another word. They really go hand in hand. Advocacy. Does anyone in here consider themselves an advocate? So if I could hear from one of the sisters, why do you consider yourself an advocate, if you don't mind sharing?
Because I have been given a lot. Like you, family, parents, my dad's over there. I was given a lot. And to see other people and women, I started out as a breast cancer advocate. Black women, we die more, unnecessarily. So it is now my passion, and I actually work in public health now, long story how I got there. But the way Black people are treated, from people of color, because of their color. And we have to, it's still a long fight.
Yes.
Black women, not only do we die from breast cancer, bringing people into the world, bringing these babies into the world, we will die if you don't have an advocate or someone to speak up for you. And it doesn't matter how much money you have. It's across the board. Black women are just dying because they don't listen. So it's up to us to assist those who don't have a voice. And if you have a voice, use it in a positive aspect, not just to hear yourself talk. Absolutely. You have to make those changes.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for sharing it. Thanks for the work that you do. So let me go back. I'm a teacher by profession. I have been teaching since 1995. So it is almost abnormal for me to not have some type of visual aid when I talk about any topic. I'm going to share with you a portion of what we call our youth leadership training. It is youth engaged in social justice and service. What my hope is that for our seasoned advocates who are in the room, that you will be motivated just a bit to continue the good work by seeing a very simple strategy that we use, practical strategy that we use with our youth. And for our younger people who may not be engaged just yet into any level of activism or advocacy, that you'll be motivated and encouraged, and that you'll realize that no matter where you are, no matter how old you are, you have a voice. And there is something that you can do with that voice, and that your voice shouldn't be limited to what you can do for yourself. So that is the goal of what I'm going to share. So you know a little bit about me because I did move ahead. You know that I grew up in Bowling Park. I was fortunate enough to be raised in the household with my grandparents. And that was such a huge blessing to me. I was an only child. So I was able to get the love and the attention of my grandparents, all of my aunties and my uncles, because as an only child, I was also the only grandchild at the time in the household. I grew up in a community where at the time, there were things that we witnessed as young children that we should not have witnessed, but that was many years ago. And so when we look at our communities now and we see how much worse it is, it's so troubling. And that's why I say that there is room for everyone to serve in some capacity of advocacy and activism. I am currently a homeschool mom because even though I fought really hard. Yay, homeschool. I fought for many years in Norfolk Public Schools as a history teacher to incorporate African American history. I was the only teacher at some point teaching African American history. I had to fight for that. I was one of the only teachers fighting to even have African American history included in our curriculum when the standards of learning said not so. Wow. I was one of the only teachers in Norfolk Public Schools who was teaching true history instead of the distorted history. And as our MC said earlier before I came up, you become a target. So I got shifted to so many different schools because I was a rebel rouser. I was a system disruptor. And they didn't like that because I questioned the things that didn't make sense to me. And I passed that gene on to my daughter. I have to tell you, she's a lawyer. I have to tell you stories. I was a teacher, I think, just to help get her through school because I was called into so many meetings because the teacher would say, well, she told me that this wasn't right. Well, it wasn't right. It's not accurate, and we can sit, we can have a meeting. Very outspoken young lady, as all of my children are, so it made sense. So I left the school system, began homeschooling in 2009. This is a traumatic experience I'll share, but I won't go into details. But in 2009, my 4 children and myself lost, he was the father of my children, my former husband. He was murdered in Virginia Beach. He was born in Brooklyn, New York, in the same place Biggie Smalls grew up. And so he came to Virginia, of course, expecting to live a safer life. And we were actually doing an advocacy event. I came home and he went back out to see the Yankees play, and someone was trying to rob a family-owned business. They were good friends of ours, and he stood his ground. He was 6'5". He was a strong, powerful man, and he took out in a physical fight 4 guys, and they emptied a clip in his back. And so that fueled my fight even greater. And so my focus in the last 15 years has been advocating and serving as an activist for women and children who've been impacted by trauma. Trauma is a huge, broad word, and it's still very misunderstood. But most of us, I would venture to say all of us, have had some exposure to at least emotional and psychological trauma in our lives. And when you look at it statistically, as my sister stated about breast cancer, the same is true with minority, women, people of color. We are affected more adversely than any other community because of a lack of resources, even sometimes a lack of the ability to speak up for ourselves. Going into the doctor's office, knowing that there's something more that you may need, but you aren't able to articulate. I have worked with parents through the organization to advocate for their children who have IEPs in the school system, whose children have been labeled as bad kids or having ADHD before you've tried anything else. You're just assuming that this is the problem, and some parents don't have the education, the awareness, or the ability to articulate that this is not what I desire for my son. My son does, or maybe my son doesn't need an IEP, but he needs a 504 plan, and being able to understand that. So that is the work that we do now through the organization is Hearts Full of Grace. We do many other things, but that is one of our focuses, is advocating for women and children who've been impacted by trauma. So again, I say to my seasoned activists, I hope that some of the strategies I shared that we convey to our youth, I hope that it will resonate with you. I'm sure you will hear some of the things that I say and you'll realize, oh, we do that already. And I know you do, and I appreciate all of you